So I'm so grateful for Maureen, our beautiful. Looking forward to everything that you're going to say, Maureen Muldoon. This mic is all yours.
Thanks, Lynn. This is one of my favorite stories. I know I say that a lot when I talk about different stories, but this one really is one of my favorite stories. And the basic idea is that life is not a dress rehearsal. It's a wild adventure, and your presence to it is requested. Life is this untamable, it will lift us and then it will level us. And still we are invited to come, as that poem by Mary Oliver says, to come, married to the amazement and taking the world in our arms. And when we do meet up with tight corners or rough patches or angry giants, as we will, to simply remember to remind ourselves that there is nothing our holiness cannot do. And I hope that you leave this talk today knowing this truth in the bone marrow of your being, and hopefully find out also that, because we're talking about kindness for the whole year, that true kindness leads to true royalty. And on this week of Valentine, that you might also be inspired to really honor your heart's calling. So I wanted to share a story about the unlikely slayer of giants. And this story is David and Goliath. And you probably heard it before. And like I said, it's one of my favorite stories. And it's about you, and it's about me, and it's about the stages of consciousness as well. So it goes that back in the day, there was this bad king and there was this good shepherd. I mean, right there, we've got this great conflict. The king's name was King Saul. And apparently he was, not a godly man. He was a bit of a tyrant. He was jealous. He was controlling. He was divisive. And then we have this guy, David, on the other hand, and he's this humble shepherd who's living out in the fields. He's caring for the sheep and he's protecting them from lions and bears, and he's using a slingshot to do so. And both these men are in life. They are on the wild adventure. And it made me think of that picture we've all seen floating around the internet of the two women on the roller coaster. And one has like her hands in the air, waving like she just don't care. And the other one is like clinging for dear life. This is Saul and David. They are, as we are, on the roller coaster. And the difference between joy, the difference between a good man and a bad man, the difference between a good life and a bad life, a good ride and a bad ride, is that one has complete faith that everything is working out for their highest good, and the other one is absolutely sure that it's not. So back in the day, in the times of these two kings, God saw that Saul was like mucking up the message of love. And so God sent Samuel to Bethlehem, which apparently must be the land of kings, because that's why we find the other king. And he meets up with this man named Jess. He's actually told to go see this man named Jess, who has 8 sons. And he says, you're going to anoint one of them as the king. And he says, but look, you won't know him by looking at him. You got to look at his heart. You really got to look at his heart. So Samuel meets up with the sons, and they all seem bright and noble, strong and capable. But Samuel feels like, maybe something's missing. And he says to Jess, do you got any more sons? And Jess says, well, I got this guy out in the field. His name's David. He's the youngest, pretty scrawny. I don't think he's king material. He's looking after the sheep. So Samuel goes out to see this unlikely king. And maybe he saw him tending the sheep. And maybe he saw him, blowing his flute or singing his songs, which he's known to do. I think some of his songs are actually in the Psalms in the Bible. Or maybe he was fending off lions and bears. Or maybe he just saw his heart. Maybe he just saw his heart. Have you ever taken the time to really see someone's heart? It's funny that we get to see Mia and Clive. Obviously, they see each other's heart. I was thinking when I was writing this about my own husband, Will. When I married him, he was a bit of a king. He had more money than we would ever need. And he was very generous. And then one day, through a sleight of fate, all the money was gone. And I thought, oh my God, like to watch a kingdom fall was very rattling. But I watched him and he just wrote it out. He didn't change a beat. He was the same exact man and he still acted with impeccable and regal integrity. The money had nothing to do with it. And he simply went about restoring his kingdom. And when friends and family came to him, as they did before and prior to that experience, he drained his bank account to help out a friend. Pretty unnerving being his wife, watching somebody do that. But he never let a coin that he held on to be held back if it could help somebody. And it's just not a consciousness he's willing to live in. He's just not willing to live in that idea of scarcity. You might know somebody who's like that, who has exquisite generosity with their life, with their time, with their talents. And this is what makes you regal. Kindness, generosity, those are the things that truly make you regal, that truly set you up as a king in the world. So who are the generous people, the souls in your life? When I was writing, I was also thinking about Maureen Claffey's dad, Ed. He would show up at church and he would give me all kinds of notes. He was so generous. And when he died, we went to his service, which was fit for a king. And so many people got up to celebrate him and share his generosity and how his generosity literally changed their lives forever. So many people knew his heart. So whatever it was that Samuel saw about David out in the field, he saw his heart, and he announced that this shepherd boy would be the king. And Samuel anointed David with the oil. And then David went back to tending the sheep again. Nothing else really changed. And so we have these two kings. We have King Saul, who's a man of the world. We have King David, who has, been anointed by God, but still out in the field. And between these two men, we have the spectrum of our own potential. They're both regal. King Saul has this regal state according to the law of man. He works in the world of form, and he did his best to control by all means possible what he wanted. And you could say that he was in sort of this victim warrior consciousness, because he was seeing the world as divided and divisive, and he was fearful, and he was making choices from a fearful place. And that's why he was mucking up the message. And David, on the other hand, was rooted in a bit more of the channel energy. He wasn't attempting to chase a crown. It's like the last thing on his bucket list. In fact, he was simply doing what was at hand, and he was just loving the ones that he was with. And this is the channel consciousness. And so what happens? The crown comes to him. Out in the field, in the most unlikely places, the crown comes to him. This is what we could practice. Instead of getting, we could move into letting. That's the spiritual theory that's called the kingdoms of consciousness. And basically, it's saying that we're all moving to enlightenment through these four corridors of consciousness, and that there's four of them. The first one is victim, and those who are in victim are completely asleep to their power, to their potential. They take zero responsibility for living in their life, and they engage in a lot of blame and shame and fear. Don't wrong yourself if you find yourself in any of these kingdoms of consciousness, because we all vacillate through them on the daily. But the mantra of the victim is, why are you doing this to me? I'm so confused. I don't understand anything. You're so confusing. Why does this not work out for me? Why does no one love me? And the pose is protection. This is the pose of the victim, protection. And the mantra is, I can't. The warrior is when we move into, or we find ourselves, or those who are around the idea of making change. Like we realize in the victim, I'm the common denominator. I need to make some change. We take the reins of our life. We begin to change our minds. It's the only thing we can really change. And that thus begins to change our experience. And the warrior is called the warrior because even though it's better than the victim, this is the pose, it's beginning to take the reins. Even though it's better than the victim, it's still at war. It's still at war with what is. There's still this belief in its mind that says, I don't have, so I have to manifest it, or I don't want, so I have to manifest it. So it's still trying to bully itself into this other state of being, as opposed to channeling, staying out on the field, petting the sheep, let the crown come to you. The mantra of the warrior is, I will do what is mine to do, and I will tract it through my own will. Again, it's a great place to stop, to move through. You don't want to live there. The channel is the one who knows that they cannot outgood God. And even if they got everything they wanted, they'd still be living in that consciousness of wanting. So they let go of the form and they surrender their will to God's will. And they say, I place myself in the care of God's will. So I can't, I will. And then the mantra is, I need do nothing. Like, don't you want to just live there? I need do nothing. And then the final stage is what I've come to call this sugar cube. You've heard me say this before. The one who has surrendered, the sugar cube that surrenders into the hot tea of God. Not only does she surrender her will, herself to God, but in this stage, she actually surrenders the idea of self. And into the hot tea she goes. And we are all one with everything in this state. And we just rise like the sun, equally shining on all things everywhere all the time. So back to the story. David's a bit of the Cinderella, and he's out in the fields with his 7 brothers living in the bougie house. And David maybe drew the short straw or something, but he's out in the field and in the elements. And yet he seems to be pretty happy. And he's tending the sheep and he's really good at it. And he shows us this other little theory, like, be where you're at, grow where you're planted. To create heaven, we can't run to the next neighbor's yard. We have to grow it in our own backyard. We have to be with it in our own consciousness. And, and to create heaven, we can do that even from what might seem to be like hell. Because really, it's an interpretation and everything can seem kind of hellish. I mean, even for David's brothers, they're out on the war front. King Saul, again, he's divided the people, the Israelites, David's people, and the Philistines. They weren't getting along. They're in this war. And David's brothers are responsible for, holding their land and their rights. And the Philistines want it to be their land and their rights. So the Israelites and the Philistines are each, they've set up camp on either side of the valley. And the Philistines were notorious warriors. They had a reputation for being very dangerous, and they were giants and very well versed in war. And so for 40 days, the Philistine army will send down their biggest and the most fearful, which is Goliath. And he curses and he threatens the Israelites. And the Israelites are so scared of this guy, and they do nothing for 40 days and 40 nights, but watch this tirade. And, just like those 2 women on the roller coaster, the Israelites, they weren't like waving their hand like they don't care, and they weren't holding on for dear life. They weren't even on the roller coaster. They were frozen. They were like stymied sheep watching Fox News. They were just frozen. So we've all, we have places where we sit on the bench and we watch life go by, and we become observers instead of engagers. In the marketing world, they say that 1% of the population creates like 90% of the content, and that 20% engage with the content and 70% watch. I found that to be so fascinating. In that poem by Mary Oliver, it says, when it's over, I don't want to say that my life was, for nothing. I want to say all my life, I was bride, married to amazement. I was the groom taking the world in my arms. When it's over, I don't want to wonder if I made my life something particular and real. I don't want to find myself sighing, frightened and full of argument. I don't want to end up simply having visited the world. I don't want to stand on the sidelines and watch this. I want to get on the roller coaster, be it terrifying or wonderful. It will be worth it. If we don't risk getting engaged, we leave all our unlived dreams in the tubes of paints that we never use. We, leave all of our songs just sung in the showers. We leave all of our bestsellers unwritten because we're just watching and shuffling our laundry from dryer to drawer. This is not your life. We continue to play that mantra of like all of the things that could go wrong. That's what keeps us on the bench. And we try to, to hold off our life by just sitting on the bench and watching and wondering and watching and wondering, instead of just swiping left and, selling the house and traveling the world, for God's sakes. I mean, this is a short ride. We keep ourselves busy and we entertain all of the known giants standing in our way. And slowly but surely we become stagnant. And all of those Israelites, rise up in us, and we just sit there and we watch the ranting of our internal giant. And we think too old, too late, too unworthy, too busy, one more process, one more room to clean, one more visioning. All of this happens as the dream takes up residence on the back burner. This past week, I got a note from a friend and she was like, I am doing it. I'm going to set up a night of my own songs. And I've been thinking about this for 15 years. And I was like, yeah, yeah, 15 years she's been waiting. Sadder still, when I got her note, I thought, oh my God, what am I waiting? You know, I had never planned a night of my own music, and I have songs upon songs upon songs. But, you know, and I never learned the ukulele, and I never learned Irish. I never have visited my godchild in England. But here's the thing. I'm practicing those things now. I'm in the process. I'm engaged. I take time to pick up my ukulele. I take time to study Irish. I'm terrible at all of it, but I'm not daydreaming about it. And I'm not lost in fear. I'm engaging with my heart. I know and honor my heart. Are you knowing and honoring your heart? Are you making yourself a valued Valentine in your life? You can't give what you don't have. Being around other people who are actively and elegantly slaying dragons helps us to remember that there's nothing my holiness cannot do. And so, like was mentioned, you know, on Monday, we're going to kick off this Artist Way, asking our members, the first class, to say, to think, to articulate, who do you desire to be at the end of this 13 weeks of adventure? And are you brave enough to not just contemplate it, but articulate it, your dreams and desires? When Jesus said, you know, you could raise the dead, that's what he was talking about. You're either a living Christ or a docile dead man. And there's very little gray area between the two. So another fun fact about David and Goliath, and I learned this from Malcolm Gladwell's book, David and Goliath, is that every time that they retell this story in the Bible as the years move on, Goliath actually grows. Like, he gets bigger. Our fears get bigger and bigger. You know, the earliest accounts of the story say that he was 6'9", which is already really big. But later accounts have him at 9 feet 9 inches. The longer we wait, the bigger the problems seem to be, until we grow, you know, this major defense, and we throw up our hands in complete fear, and we fold. And yet there's nothing my holiness cannot do. It's interesting how we love to kind of expand our fear and romance our problems and call in sick to life. And the longer we wait on dreams, the bigger the giant gets. And for the Israelites, it was 40 years. For my friend, it was 40 days and 40 nights. For my friend, it was 15. How long will it be for you? How long will you, you know, let your busy work rob you of your brilliance, rob us of your brilliance? You might think, well, I don't want to learn anything more. I don't want to be a beginner. I've established myself as an expert, and I don't want to see things differently. I don't want to put myself out there. I'm quite comfortable in the tightness of my own unbloomed garden. And you might say, it's too late for me. Dreams, desires, destinations are all gone and faded. But let me tell you, they're not. They patiently wait for you. Toni Morrison did not explode into the public eye until 1993, when she became the first African-American woman to win the Nobel Prize for Literature. She was 62 years old. Laura Ingalls began writing Little House on the Prairie at 65. If you're 65 and I'm making this seem like old, don't worry. That 75, Barbara Hiller became the oldest person and the first Black woman to reach the North Pole at 75. At 77, John Glenn became the first and the oldest person to get into space at 77 years. And at 87 years of age, Mary Baker Eddy founded the Christian Science Monitor. The more we think about it, the less we'll be about it. So let your thoughts move to your mouth, and then let the laws of your words get fired up with the passion of your heart, and let the vibration combined with the law of your mouth and the fire of your passion, and let it animate your hands and begin and take action. You know, sign up for the Artist Way or any other action to speak about your destiny, your true heart's desire. Don't be willing to be captivated by your own fear. Awareness is not meant to harm you, but it can feel painful when we begin to become aware that we're not fully living. Awareness is not meant to harm you, but arm you with an arsenal of truth that can lay waste all your giants. So waking up again cannot always be pleasant, but falling asleep and being asleep and staying asleep is pure hell. So here's another fun fact. The name Goliath means to captivate. Isn't that great? And that's what Goliath does. That's his job. He captivates the Israelites. To captivate means to hold attention, to hold someone's attention. That can tell you how valuable our attention is. If you're one of the 70% who just watch the world go by, you're giving everything away. And if we give it away to unworthy sources, we can be held captive by illusions. So this is the negative use of the warrior. Conscious use of conscious placement of your attention will make the difference between warrior, where you're at war or where you're beginning to slay your life. If you give your attention to that which you want to experience, it will grow and flourish. If you give your attention to that which you do not want to experience, it will grow and flourish. What you focus on increases. What wires together, fires together. One day I will play the ukulele. I'm giving it my attention. So after this stalemate of victim, of I can't do, we say it's too late, and we move into warrior, and we begin to say, I can change my mind. And then we begin to move into channel, and we begin to say, I don't know how to do this. I'm just going to surrender it. And the less I seek, the more I know. And the more you surrender, the more you remember. So we have this standoff with Goliath, and he says, choose your man. Let's get into battle. If you win, we'll be your slaves. If you win, we'll be your slaves, but you're not going to win because we're going to crush and destroy you. And the real Israel camp is like they're literally just watching. They don't do anything. They can't even move. How can they send anyone down there to go against this opponent? It would be crazy. And besides, when he says you're going to be our slaves, they're already his slaves. They are absolutely captivated by his, whole, story. They're captivated by it. This could also be what it means when Jesus says us to turn the other cheek, to stop looking and romancing all the problems. They had sat for 40 days thinking about how audacious Goliath was, and he told them, I am going to crush you. It's kind of fun to think about that monologue. And they fell asleep. They dropped into unconsciousness. They fell under the spell of fear. And there's no way they could have won. They needed a miracle. And enters David, the one with the heart of the king. And David didn't know about Goliath. He was out in the field. He was way out where the buses don't run, taking care of the sheep. And he was just there one day to deliver food to his brothers. And he had this heart of the king. And, a king doesn't cower. And he heard Goliath. And though he was not a man of war, he got fired up. And he actually somehow believed that he could take down the giant. And once he saw the giant hurling these curses at his people, he got so fired up, the same way he got fired up when he went after the lions and the bears that were trying to harm his sheep. And he felt called into action. And here he represents the beginner mind. He's not polluted by the 40 days and 40 nights. He saw the giant, and he goes to the King Saul and he begs him, let me at him. So funny. And at first the king refuses. He's like, you're crazy. You're not ready. There's this voice within all of us that senses our opportunities, beckons us forward, boils in our bones and says, I want to do that. We get fired up with our heart and we're like, that's for me. We stir it in our guts and we think, I can do that. And we want to, and we wish to, and we think about it. And it moves through our hearts and it moves up to our heads. And then the king, which represents the crown, shuts it down. And the head is like, not logical. The head says, no, it's not going to work out. It doesn't make any sense. The heart is not logical to the head. The head wants to protect the heart, and the heart seems foolish to the head. And the heart sends down warnings. No, you're too small. You're too little. You're too poor. You're too black. You're too white. It'll use anything it can to shut down the heart. The head can get afraid of the heart because it knows how powerful it is. The head likes things to be safe, to make sense. But if we're always leaning and leading by the head, we'll never experience the greatness of our hearts, the same greatness that we get to experience in the story of David. So the good news is the heart's not easily denied. The heart will keep knocking and knocking. And if it's your calling, it will not be denied, even if it takes you till 87 before you start your Christian Science monitor. It will wait. So the heart continues to beg, and David continues to beg. I can do this. And David tells King Saul, about the lions and the bears and how he took them down, and that he says he can go after this giant with one strike of a slingshot. We are not willing to let go of our dreams, that it just continues to boil up. And from a distance, we see that the confidence gained from all of the classrooms that had taken us down, that had caused us to be afraid of this moment, were actually the very things that ordained us for this moment. And the giants will start knocking at our door, and we'll just have to take a deep breath and go to the head and say to the head, I know it doesn't make any sense, but it's actually really safe for me. It's safe for me to be led by my heart, because you see, there's nothing my holiness cannot do. And I can't just know this with you. I actually have to show this to me. So the head will feel the passion of the heart and it will soften. And if the head can't stop the heart, it will put conditions on it. And in the story of the king and David, the king says, okay, you got to carry the sword. You got to carry the shield. You got to get armored up. But all of it was too heavy for David. So he refused it. He said, I can't go this way. All I need is a few rocks. And this part of the story is when we begin to place conditions on our heart. And we're like, okay, I'm going to let you go out there and do what you really want to do. I'm going to go let you sing your songs, but first you got to get a degree. You got to make a CD, and maybe I'll let you sing happy birthday to a very dear friend in a dark corner of some restaurant, but only after you explain for a long time that you're not actually a singer. Those are the conditions that we put on our hearts. But if our hearts are strong enough, it will win that battle too. And David's like, no, I'm not going with these conditions. I'm enough. I'm enough. Place your hand on your heart and remind yourself, you're enough. There's nothing your holiness cannot do. So the king gives David permission, and David runs down the hill to kill the giant. This unlikely opponent comes with no armor, no sword, no special support team. Goliath, full armor, javelin, sword, spear, and he is encumbered with his own defenses, and it's his strength that turns against him in the end that makes him so weak. He was expecting a man like him to come in full armor, moving slowly under the weight of the socially accepted garb of war. The giant was totally taken off guard by this little, pipsqueak. He just came at him with nothing. Remember the story of Cliff Young? We told a while ago about that racer, and he was up against all the professionals, and, they were like joking on him because he had these like farmer's boots and these overalls. And he too was a shepherd out in the field, and it was the fact that he didn't conform to the professional known paths that actually caused him to win in the end. And this is David. He follows his heart. He doesn't allow the appearance of things to blind him to the infinite possibilities. He activates the human resource of love that makes all things possible. He demonstrates ways of being and attitudes that support the welfare of the environment he wants to experience, and he faces his fears, and he slew his fears, and not just for himself, but he did it for all of us because we're still talking about him. And he became king. Now he has even more of a story that we won't get into today, but I wanted to leave you with these questions. Where are you avoiding your actions? Where has your head shut down your heart? Write out these things. Don't just think about them, write them out. Where have you been thinking about your dreams, your destinies, your desires? And how would you begin to talk about them? And to who? Are you facing a giant problem or an impossible situation? And can you call upon the beginner mind and see the situation from a fresh vantage point? If one of us can do it, all of us can do it. And as all of us begin to do it, it becomes more of a normal conversation to speak about the most brilliant aspects about ourselves instead of to cower, to begin to really live into and embody the theory that there surely is nothing that my holiness cannot do. And that's the word.